Welcome to IFQ Online at First Global Academy. In this video clip, we will be covering the first chapter, the basis of Islamic banking and finance. Let's start asking what Islamic banking and finance. Islamic banking and finance can be defined as any interaction for the financial purposes between two or more parties under the Sharia compliant manner is known as Islamic banking and finance. In a situation of where a party wanted to fulfill their personal needs through a Sharia compliant manner, they approach a financial institution and they get fulfilled their need is considered to be a financial transaction based on Sharia compliant. Now, you may be wondering why Islam, known to be as a religion most of the time, why it has to deal with economics, banking, business, finance and leasing. In fact, Islam is a complete way of life. Islam has spoken with regard to how a person should conduct himself with a neighbor, how to conduct himself with another human being. As I mentioned, Islam is a complete way of life, which includes the financial transactions also. So we have to understand what are the Islamic commercial ethics in order to conduct our business and banking affairs. There are 5 Islamic commercial ethics which has been spoken about. Number 1, stewardship of humanity. When we say stewardship of humanity, we believe that all our possessions belongs to the one and only Creator. And also we believe that we have been sent to the earth in order to serve others. So we are representative of our Creator. So any business that I do, I have to believe that I am a representative and I have been sent on this earth to serve another human being. Number 2 is known as integrity. As we all know, we have to steadfastness in terms of integrity and also strictly adhere for the principles of integrity. Third one is known as sincerity. The sincerity, it comes as a truthfulness for the business deals, not because of that I'm interacting with another human being, because we believe that we have been watched and we will be held accountable and responsible for the transaction that I do. And the fourth one is known as piety. In Arabic we call that as taqwa. Taqwa is known as whether you are in private or public, you have been watchful and you will be held accountable for whatever the actions you do. So when we are fearful for the one and only Creator, then all our business transactions will be adjusted in order to ensure that I will have all my dealings based on sincerity and integrity. So piety is one of the main principles of all Islamic commercial ethics. The last one, the fifth one, we have been said that all what we do needs to be at the best and also perfection at work. We have to do the right thing and also to the best. So summarizing all these Islamic commercial ethics together, it is entitled and it has been prescribed in a very good way that we have to conduct our business dealings irrespective of the country or region we belongs to. Now let's analyze what are the general features of an Islamic economy when a business banking is following the earlier said 5 Islamic commercial ethics. Whenever we follow those ethics, the businesses will be reflecting the true nature or the features of the Islamic economy. Number 1, there will be a healthy competition in the market. There won't be any undercut, there won't be black market, profiteering, and all those nature of the negative influencing market practices will not be imposed, will not be practiced. Another important feature that it will reflect is always the market will be upholding the ethical and moral principles, such as always the businesses will be talking the truth and fulfilling the promises on time, and deliveries will be according to the specifications which has been mentioned or requested for in terms of quality, quantity, time and everything. So these nature of the market practices will come known as ethical and moral conducts of the businesses. Also, Islamic finance, we believe that money needs to be treated as a medium of exchange, not as an asset. So this we will be discussing later on in different chapters as how this has been dealt in Islamic finance. As Islam is encouraging the business to take place, it is also talking about certain prohibition list such as gambling, casinos, nightclubs, pornography, adult entertainments, production of arms, and all these nature of the negative influencing products to the market has been completely banned in Islamic finance. So as an Islamic financial organization, we will never involve in terms of promotion, financing them, or in any nature of the involvement for those nature of businesses. Islamic finance, we believe in asset-backed transaction and not fictitious asset creation on a cyberspace. Islamic finance, we always encourage, and also always any dealings needs to be backed by or based on an asset or a project. Wealth creation has been highly encouraged in Islam. Like the birds are getting out of the nest and looking for their sustenance on a daily basis, in the same way, Muslims have been asked to go and look for their sustenance on a daily basis. Islam is against the laziness and unproductive work. Also, it is against the effortless money creation based on passage of time. So, wealth creation needs to be done in a productive way and also in a way that it will be adding values to your economy. Another good example that I can quote here is, after the Friday Jummah sermon, we have been asked to go out and seek our sustenance. Meaning, soon after your prayer, you go and look for the business, that is, we say that you create your wealth. As much as it has been promoted regarding the wealth creation, it is also highly promoted in terms of wealth distribution. Islam is one of the religion where it has been highly promoting the charitable causes. Let me brief three of them here. Number one is known as zakat. Zakat is mandatory on a certain group of people, to be given for certain group of people at a different minimum level needs to be met on a yearly basis. Regarding the zakah, we will be discussing later in chapter number 4 in detail. Secondly, sadaqah. Sadaqah is known as voluntary and optional. Whenever, wherever a person wishes that they can give sadaqah, that they can give for anyone, whoever they wish. Sadaqah or charity, which will be involved in Islamic banking and finance in different aspects, which we will be discussing later on. Number 3, which I would like to talk about, is waqf. That is, for the sake of the community, rich people have been encouraged to do a certain level of distribution of the wealth in terms of doing something for the sake of community. Under the waqf, whether schools or auditoriums or science lab or playground or the roads, anything that will be benefiting for the society which can be done under waqf. And also, not only the community, also their own family members, those who are known as the inheritors, also can get benefit out of those properties which they are leaving behind the community. So, under the charities, we have many. Here I am highlighting 3 of them: zakah, sadaqah and waqf. Regarding the zakah and sadaqah, we will be discussing in detail later on the different chapters. All these important factors known as the features which we discuss is considered to be the true reflection of the Islamic economy. Islamic banking and finance industry is one of the niche market. In certain market it has been the grown market or the matured market, but is still striving through the development period of this Islamic banking and finance and yet to see the fully fledged features of the Islamic economy. Now let's get into another area of Islamic finance, most importantly to know what is Sharia and how this Sharia has been derived. Islam can be divided into 3 main parts known as Aqidah, Akhlaq and Sharia. Aqidah is all about the belief a person will have with regard to the Islam is known as Aqidah. Secondly, Akhlaq is known as the moralities or the practices, what a person would like to conduct himself, the good habits we normally refer to. The third one is known as the Sharia. Sharia is normally referred as Islamic law, but in fact it also includes the custom, practices, market activities and everything included as a complete package as how to live a life that is all about Sharia. Sharia can be divided into 2, Ibadah and Muamalat. Let's talk about Ibadah. Ibadah is all about the relationship between the creations and the Creator. For example, a Muslim will be praying 5 times for a day, or going for Hajj, or maybe fasting during the month of Ramadan is mainly because of he has been asked to do so by his Creator. So he is fulfilling his obligations for the sake of his Creator. So this relationship between the creations and the Creator is known as ibadah. Secondly, Muamalat has been categorized as the relationship between a man and another man. It is not between a Muslim and another Muslim. In fact, it is between two different parties. So when we talk about how we will be conducting ourselves with another human being, whether it's for the business purposes, political purposes, maybe for any other reason, everything has been prescribed as what are the best things to be done and also what needs to be avoided. So this is what is all about Muamalat. Under Muamalat only, all the financial transactions are also coming under the purview. So here, in this particular program, whatever we discuss, all will be related to Muamalat. Let's quickly understand there's a small difference between Sharia and Fiqh. Sharia is Islamic law and Fiqh is known to be the understanding of Sharia law. Now, if you see, the Sharia will be very general and fixed rules and regulation. But when it comes to the Fiqh, normally it will be very specific and also there will be a certain degree of flexibility with regard to the rules that is based on the understanding of the Sharia framework. So let me give a brief idea on that with an example. Under Sharia framework, we have been asked to pray 5 times. Now, the rules and regulations will be different if you are a traveler, a person who lives in a place where you don't see the sun, or maybe a person who is disabled. There are 2 types of rules normally we have been asked to fulfill or follow. One is known as a religious rule, the other one is known as the country's rule. So always religious rule known to be the divine rule and the country's rule known to be the jurisdiction law. Also another key point that we have to understand is always divine rule will be the superior with regard to the jurisdiction rules and regulations. In order to understand that, let's look at one of the examples. In most of the countries, bribery has been prohibited by the country's rule, and it is also have been prohibited by major religions in the world. So if we take both the rules and regulations what we have, that is country's rule and also the religious rule, both are saying bribery is prohibited. Now let's look at another example. Interest. Interest has been prohibited by Islam and Christianity. But if we see the country's rule, the interest have been allowed. That is why we have the central banking system in the countries. Now when we have where country's rule is allowing, at the same time the religious rule says no for it, always we believe in Islamic finance the divine rule will be the superior. That is why we wanted a banking system without interest. Personal responsibility is known as Fardh Ain. That is known as individual obligations. Most of the time these individual obligations are needs to be fulfilled by each and every person. That is, for example, as I mentioned, the obligations from the religious point of view, the time of the prayers, we have to do our prayers, and then Saum, known as Ramadan time, or the fasting period, we have to do fasting, Hajj and Umrah, that is to go for pilgrimage, and all these nature of the things becomes liable on me, including Zakat. Second important responsibility is known as Fardh Kifaya, that is known as collective obligation. This collective obligation is known to be as a society, as a community, as a citizen of the country, as collectively we have to fulfill these obligations. For example, some of those villages, they get together and they build the hospital. The collective responsibility with regard to the hospital for the entire village people will be lifted. That is no need, because if someone or some group of people, when they fulfill it, others they don't need to fulfill. So those nature of the collective obligations are categorized as Fardh Kifaya. So far we have discussed with regard to what is Islamic banking and finance, what are the features of Islamic economy, and also we spoke about what is Sharia and different aspects of Sharia. Now let's talk about how this Sharia has been derived. Sources of Sharia can be divided into three main parts. Number one is known as primary sources. Let's talk about primary sources now. Under the primary sources, there are two main sources. Number one is known as Quran. Quran is known as the text of the Creator, or the communication manual from the Creator to the creations, that was communicated through the last and final messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So our entire conversation which has been recorded and which is available and known as Quran. Under the primary sources, the second main source is known as Sunnah. Sunnah is generally categorized as the tradition or the customs or the way of life of last and final messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When I say traditions of last and final messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it includes three main things: actions, approvals, and his sayings. All these considered to be also part of the rule. Under the sources of Sharia, the second important category that we have to discuss is the secondary sources. When we don't find an answer directly from Quran and Sunnah, then this particular category becomes an important part to form a rule. In fact, these are categorized under different areas. There are many things that needs to be considered, but in our chapters, which we will be covering, only three of them, known as Ijma, Qiyas, and Ijtihad. Let's talk about Ijma. Ijma can be translated as the majority of ulamas, known as the scholars, Islamic scholars, opinion about a particular problem. Sometimes these problems have been discussed and the rules have been derived in the past. So we can refer them. If not, if it is a new problem, then the current ulamas, current Islamic scholars can come together and take a decision with regard to that. So when a group of scholars coming together, discussing those matters and taking the majority of ulama's opinion with regard to the problem, that is known as Ijma. For example, forward sales have been prohibited. That is due to various reasons. So the scholars have been coming along and discussing the forward sales issues from Sharia perspective and financial market perspective, and then they have derived the ruling of not to deal with the forward sales. So it is an ijma, or the consciousness of majority of ulama's opinion with regard to one problem. Secondly, let's discuss regarding qiyas. Qiyas is known as analogy. When we say analogy, that is, we have a current problem, but we have an old ruling. So we will be discussing with regard to the current problem by analyzing the past rules and regulation to derive at a problem what we have in our hand. For example, grape wines have been prohibited those time. When I say those time, the ruling have been derived sometime really back. But we have a new liquid form of grape wine which is having an intoxicant, meaning how do we derive at a ruling of having that modern form of intoxicants. So in order to derive at that ruling, we will be always referring the ruling of the past by doing an analogy, by doing an analysis on the past. That is what is all about qiyas. The third important one under the secondary sources is known as ijtihad. Ijtihad can be translated as interpretation or opinion. When I say opinion, when we have Islamic scholars with regard to a problem what we have in our hand, they may come out with their own opinions. That is what we refer here as ijtihad. In another word, these also have been referred as fatwa. Now there are two types of fatwa normally we see in the market. One is known as individual fatwa, that is individual Sharia scholars' opinion about a particular issue. Secondly, we have the collective ijtihad, that is known as a group of scholars get together and offer their opinion as a group of scholars with regard to that problem what we have in our hand. So this is what referred as the opinion. When we don't find an answer from the primary sources, that is Quran and Sunnah, then we move into the secondary sources. Under that we spoke about three important things: ijma, qiyas and ijtihad. When we look at the answers from these, sometimes still we may not find an answer. So we may require the additional sources of Sharia. Let's have a look at them. Another important aspect of Sharia, how it has been derived, other than the primary sources and secondary sources, to be considered as the authorities of interpretation. When I say authorities of interpretation, here I am referring to different schools of thoughts. We have Shafi Imam, Maliki, Hanbali, Hanafi. These nature of the schools of thoughts will also have an influence when we wanted to derive a solution for a particular problem. This also needs to be highly considered, considering different schools of thoughts. Like schools of thoughts, we have another two important things: the Islamic Fiqh Academy, and also we have to discuss with regard to Sharia Supervisory Board. Let's talk about the Islamic Fiqh Academy. Islamic Fiqh Academy was created in 1981 after one of the decision by OIC, that is known as Organization for Islamic Conference, which was held in 1980s. This Islamic Fiqh Academy was mainly created for the purpose of bringing the experts from different fields, whether it's ICT, banking, medical. You bring the people together to issue the opinions with regard to the contemporary issues what we face in the world. These issues will be normally discussed between the experts of the different subject matter with the Sharia scholars, which we are facing a problem, and then the issues of those will be coming as a resolution, as a fatwa for the people to follow. Another important and also vital for the Islamic banks to discuss with regard to the Sharia rules and regulation, how do we derive, is from Sharia Supervisory Board, generally known as Sharia Board. Let's discuss little detail about Sharia Supervisory Board. Sharia Board, as we all know, normally an integral part, that is the key differentiating department between the Islamic bank and a conventional bank. If there is no Sharia Supervisory Board in an Islamic bank, that bank cannot be called as Islamic bank. Sharia Supervisory Board normally consists of minimum of 3 to 5 Sharia scholars as the main board. And they will be meeting on a periodic basis to look at the transactions and business compliance with the Sharia, and they will be reviewing all the documents, process, and also if there is any customer complaints, management issues, and also the central bank needs certain levels of information with regard to the advisory, maybe with regard to the auditing. The Sharia Supervisory Board will be responsible for all these nature of the matters. When we have a Sharia Supervisory Board, those who are meeting on a periodic basis also equally require some time. Depends on the company's or the bank's size, we may require the in-house Sharia department. In-house Sharia Supervisory Department will be held responsible by a number of Sharia scholars to report to the work on a daily basis and to review, audit and advise the bank's management. The in-house Sharia department will be always in liaison with the main Sharia Supervisory Board. There are various types of Sharia Supervisory Board in the world. Let's have a look at them. Number 1, Centralized Sharia Supervisory Board. If you take, for example, Malaysia, the Bank Negara, Central Bank of Malaysia, is having its own Sharia Supervisory Board at the regulator level and looking after all the Islamic banks in the country. So Centralized Sharia Supervisory Board is all about having a Sharia Supervisory Board at the regulator level and to supervise the entire Islamic banks in the country. Second type of Sharia Supervisory Board is known as decentralized model. When we say decentralized model, individual Islamic banks will have their own Sharia Supervisory Board for their company or for their bank. This practice is mostly done by Middle East and also Asian Islamic banks. In practice, another important model is becoming part and parcel of these different Sharia Supervisory Boards. That is known as outsourced model. When I say outsource model, mostly in the European Islamic banks, they outsource the Sharia compliance audit and Sharia board's activities to the specialized management companies or the Sharia management consultancy firm, such as Dar al-Sharia, Amani Advisors. These are few of them. So, like any other financial audit which normally given for KPMG, EY, PwC, these nature of the audit firms are conducting the bank's financial audit. The Sharia management consultancy firms or the audit firms will be conducting their Sharia compliance audit with regard to the Islamic banks. So this is another model which is normally in practice in the European Islamic banks. Let's understand what is their role and responsibilities when they are sitting as a Sharia supervisory board in an Islamic bank. There are 5 important roles and responsibilities that we can discuss now. Number 1 is known as product development. When I say product development, normally the new product development team has to discuss before they introduce the product to the market with the Sharia Supervisory Board. So the Sharia Supervisory Board will look at the entire product process, features of it, and the implementation part of it, including the promotional tools, and they will be suggesting any additions or recommendations or any revision for the features, or even they may reject the new product idea if it is at the end, if it is something similar to the riba based products. So any new product development that needs to go through the Sharia approval process to get it to the market. Another important role of the Sharia Supervisory Board can be categorized as advisory, education and awareness. When I say advisory, whether it's an Islamic bank management or the Islamic bank's customer, or even sometime at the regulator level, if they need any sort of advice with regard to the product, implementation part, processes, product structuring, documentation, or anything with regard to the Islamic finance offerings, the Sharia Supervisory Board will be responsible to make them understand about that product. It is noteworthy that Sharia Supervisory Board also having the responsibility of educating the mass. And what is Islamic finance is all about? What are the differences we have? This general public needs to be aware of the entire system what we are implementing. So this is also part and parcel of the main Sharia Supervisory Board's responsibilities. Another important role of the Sharia Supervisory Board is with regard to the zakah and sadaqah. As I mentioned, zakah for the Islamic bank's operation. In certain countries, Islamic banks have been appointed as the zakah agencies. So the zakat methodology needs to be considered separately as one of the important mandate of the Sharia Supervisory Board to look into the matters and calculate it, collect it, and also distribution of zakah. At the same time, sadaqah, which is known as voluntary charity, which as I mentioned is involved in many parts of Islamic bank. So those needs to be collected in a right way, in the right manner, and also it needs to be channeled through in the proper way. So entire charitable process will be looked after by the Sharia Supervisory Board. As a last responsibility of the Sharia Supervisory Board that I would like to talk about is audit. Sharia Supervisory Boards, the main role is all about doing a Sharia compliance audit on an annual basis, and that opinion with regard to the compliance level of the Islamic bank with regard to the products, department and all the matters will be coming as an output in the financial statement in the written format. So the Sharia compliance audit needs to be done on an annual basis like any other financial audit, and also these Sharia Supervisory Boards fatwa or the report will be incorporated to the financial statements on an annual basis. So far we have discussed regarding the functions of a Sharia Supervisory Board. These functions need to be monitored, supervised and governed. That takes place in different countries in different ways, as we discuss based on the modules of Sharia Supervisory Board followed by different countries. Let me do a quick chapter summary of what we discussed now. Chapter number 1 is all about what is Islamic banking and finance and why we are talking about Islamic finance in different features and the encouragements what we have in Islamic economy with regard to the wealth creation, wealth distribution and ethical and moral conducts. And then we discuss with regard to the Islamic bank and Sharia. So we said that Islam can be divided into three main parts: Akhlaq, Aqidah and Sharia. And we went detail of Sharia up to the extent of how the Sharia has been derived. So the Sharia has been derived by three main sources: primary sources, which includes Quran and Sunnah, and then we spoke about secondary sources, that is Ijma, Qiyas and Ijtihad, and then finally we spoke about other authorities of interpretation. Under that we spoke about different schools of thoughts, and then Islamic Fiqh Academy. Finally we spoke about the Sharia Supervisory Board. So the key point of this chapter is all about what is Islamic banking and finance, what is Sharia, and the role of the Sharia Supervisory Board. Looking forward to see you in chapter number 2.